military workforce in the country. As the region's defense cluster catalyzes and inspires local entrepreneurs, emerging industries are flourishing in San Diego and expanding into international markets. Local expertise in these fields provides strategic advantages for product development, job growth, and the commercialization of defense technology. In September 2021, leaders of Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States announced the creation of an enhanced trilateral security partnership called AUKUS. AUKUS is intended to strengthen the ability of each government to support security and defense interests, building on long-standing and ongoing bilateral ties. In fact, on March 13 of 2023, AUKUS partners, including President Biden, visited our region to announce an optimal pathway to produce a nuclear-powered submarine capability in Australia, while ensuring all three partners continue to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons and weapons technology. At the Point Loma Naval Base, President Joe Biden, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, and British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak elaborated on the three-phase program for Australia to acquire a conventionally armed, nuclear-powered submarine capability that will ultimately ensure stability and security in the Indo-Pacific region. I'm excited to hear more about this topic and the economic impact this alliance will have in our region and efforts to strengthen our workforce to address the defense cluster's needs. A couple of housekeeping instructions. I want to ask all attendees to please type your questions in the chat or Q&A box. We will get to Q&A after we hear from our guest speakers. To get our conversation started, I'd like to introduce Emily Cowley, the new head of UK government for San Diego, reporting to the British Consulate General in Los Angeles. While newer to the post, Emily has lived in San Diego for the last 7 years, where she led an international higher education partnerships within the private sector globally. In her role as head of UK government, key priorities will be to foster strong bilateral relationships between San Diego and the UK in areas of defense, science, and innovation, trade and diplomacy, as well as climate action. Emily, the floor is yours to share your insight on today's topic.
Thanks, Ernesto, and I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for everyone for joining this morning. So, as Ernesto mentioned, my name is Emily Cowley, and I'm the head of the UK government for San Diego. I report into the Consulate General in LA, and I'm just going to give you a high-level overview of the UK's perspective on the optimal pathway that Ernesto just kind of laid out there. I'm going to go over the importance that the UK gives to this partnership and how we see this strengthening our relationship with Australia and the US. So the key perspectives for the UK on this optimal pathway is that it enhances the capabilities of the AUKUS partners to contribute to the security and the stability in the Indo-Pacific region. And we see this doing so by a number of factors. So firstly, it increases the number of partner nation SSNs, so the submarines in the Indo-Pacific region. It increases our combined capacity in the undersea domain. It's also going to create additional production capacity. So it's going to enable the AUKUS partners to grow the size of our combined submarine forces. It's going to strengthen and it's going to make more resilient the trilateral supply chains. So that's really going to enhance the industrial and the trade partnerships between all three nations. And then finally, it's going to enhance the stability of the Indo-Pacific region, but also globally as well. Just as testament to how committed the UK is to this optimal pathway, financially, 2020 saw a record £24 billion 4-year uplift commitment in defence spending. On top of this, the UK intends to further build existing investments into the submarine delivery. So last year, it was announced that £2 billion would be invested into BAE systems, Barrow, Rolls-Royce, and this was going to go into creating thousands of jobs in order to strengthen and firm up the supply chain. On March 13th, with the launch of the optimal pathway, the UK, the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak announced an additional £5 billion are going to be provided to the Ministry of Defence over the next 2 years. And that's going to be spent in a number of different areas. So modernising the UK's nuclear enterprise, supporting areas like construction of industrial infrastructure, allowing continued growth and kind of support of our graduate and apprentice nuclear skills programs, and enhancing support to in-service submarines, so our existing submarine base. This is going to be followed up by yet more funding over the next decade to support the SSN AUKUS program. So investment into this partnership is seen as a key priority by the UK leadership, and it comes with a real long-term commitment as well. Now, looking at long-term kind of project goals, one of the visions is obviously a respect for the global nuclear non-proliferation program. So working openly and transparently with the International Atomic Energy Agency, and taking the partnership in a direction of innovation and leading edge capabilities. So Pillar 2 of AUKUS is going to look at wider defense cooperations by progressing work on quantum technologies, undersea capabilities, artificial intelligence and cyber, hypersonic and counter-hypersonic capabilities. And all of this is going to be supported by 2 enabling work streams on innovation and information sharing. Both of those are going to be underpinned by the trilateral partnership, and they're going to open up to a range of possible contributions regionally. So that includes wider work with academic communities in all 3 nations, as well as partners within a wider range of defense industries. So just while I have a couple more minutes, just slightly more specifically on those areas of opportunities, what they may look like. So the underseas capabilities is going to include undersea robotic autonomous systems and autonomous underwater vehicles, quantum technologies. So the focus here is going to be on positioning, navigation, timing, and trials and experimentations around these areas are going to be taking place over the next 3 years. Artificial intelligence and autonomy. So early work on this is going to be focused on accelerating the adoption and improving the resilience of autonomous and AI-enabled systems in the underwater environments. If we look at advanced cyber, the main focus here is going to be looking at protecting critical communications and operation systems, again, in contested underwater environments. So as I said, all of this is going to be underpinned by learning from one another and integrating the best approach of each AUKUS nation's commercial technologies and information. So hopefully the message I conveyed here is that the optimal pathway is critically important to the UK for meeting security and defence values, but also for strengthening and sustaining relationships with our AUKUS nation partners and creating sustained industrial and trade opportunities trilaterally.
Thank you, Emily, for being with us here today and for sharing this really valuable information and very, very educational, especially speaking about opportunities for our business sector. So thank you. Moving on to our amazing lineup of speakers for our conversation. Joining us today is Will Dyer, a higher education leader with expertise in connecting student talent with industry. Currently, Will is the director of the Corporate Affiliates Program at UC San Diego's Jacobs School of Engineering, where he leads industry relations strategies to drive partnership and support of significant talent, research, and education initiatives. He strives to build mutually beneficial partnerships in the interest of bridging the gap between industry and higher education, working with technology leaders to hire students, commercialize research, and influence the future of engineering education. We also have Stephen Camporeal, Regional Director in the UK and Europe for the Office of the Agent General of the Government of South Australia. In 2022, Stephen took this role with the aim of attracting investment to the state and support exporters in the UK and Europe. He has an extensive defense, aerospace, and management career, having begun at the Australian Defence Force as an Army engineering officer and then joined Nova Systems. Here he served as a consultant, regional manager, general manager, defense, and from 2012 as chief executive officer of the European business. And finally, we have Melissa Pina, is a director of international business development for growth and mission solutions in the Networked Information Solutions Division for Northrop Grumman's Mission Systems sector. a leading global provider, manufacturer, and integrator of advanced, secure, and agile software-defined systems and solutions. The NIS division was established in 2021 and is structured to create significant advancements in cross-domain interconnectivity, edge processing, and high-speed, cybersecure, resilient command and control to provide our customers with a decisive advantage over increasing near-peer threats. Previously, she served as Senior Capture Manager for Strategy and Business Development in the Global Surveillance Division for Northrop Grumman's Aeronautics Systems sector, where she led international business development activities and served as capture lead for the expansion in international markets for high-altitude, long-endurance aircraft. Welcome, everyone, and now let's get started. So first of all, we've got, I'm going to basically present certain questions, and I'm going to trade off between our panelists. The first question is going to be for Stephen. To start us off, can you give us a brief overview of the main objectives and expected benefits for Australia through the AUKUS security partnerships?
Yeah, thanks, Ernesto. Actually in a lucky situation in the fact that Australia has recently just published a defence security review. Many of you may be aware of that. And that document actually really does provide a lot about the logic of why Australia was so keen to be part of this AUKUS agreement. Some of the key themes that I saw in that, the first one was a change to what they are calling a national defence posture. And this is rather than just thinking of defence strategy as a defence force component, but think of that as a great entire government activity involving academic, government and industry in the whole. And I think that's was quite a key change. The second key thoughts that came through out of that was denial in all 5 domains, air, sea, land, but also cyber and space. And the third key point I would point out that I saw in that document was the comment about sufficient forces to deter threats in our area, in ours being Australia's area of interest. And in particular, they talk about the potential to threaten home operations of the adversary. I suppose that leads us then into AUKUS because actually there were concerns that the undersea capability that Australia had was not necessarily fit for purpose anymore when it came to being providing that strike capability or that ability to threaten the home operations of an adversary. Concerns around its speed, its stealthiness, its time at sea. And I think that basically, you know, those areas was what Pillar 1 was aimed at trying to tackle. It's important, though, not just to talk about Pillar 1, and as Emily really covered herself, Pillar 2 identified a shopping list of technologies that were seen as the forefront, really, of future defence capabilities, either in deterrence or denial roles. And I think I sort of believe that it was the aspiration of all 3 nations that using the shared power of academic, government and industry across all 3 nations was going to be better than the individual parts by themselves. And I think that was the other thing that was key in that respect. So what does Australia want? Well, obviously the Pillar 1 gives us back that strike capability, and the Pillar 2 part is access and being part of a bigger network in order to access technologies we really wouldn't be capable of developing ourselves.
Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate your answer and great information as well. Next question is for Melissa. Northrop Grumman is a leader in a wide range of capabilities around the world, delivering products and services to customers in 25 nations, including Australia and the UK. How do security partnerships like AUKUS strengthen Northrop Grumman's established relationships that consist of networks of offices and local business operations?
Yeah, so Northrop Grumman is a leading global technology company, so we're well positioned to help sustain Australia's sovereign interest and strengthen their defense capability. We have strategic partnerships in place to provide advanced capabilities to Australia and have more than 95,000 employees located worldwide. And over the past 2 decades, we've made significant contributions to helping grow the Australian economy, both on local Australian employees and in supporting the Australian industry for future growth. We've invested in sustainment programs that offer important skills development and career opportunities, which are vital to Australia's long-term workforce capability. And in working with and supporting Australia's research pipeline across all stages of technology development, here at Northrop Grumman, we're helping to facilitate technology innovations necessary to advance a more capable sovereign industrial base in Australia.
Thank you, Melissa. Next question is for Will. How do academic institutions like UCSD promote collaboration and ensure that security partnerships with international partners are effective in achieving their objectives?
Yeah, it's a good question. Generally, as a public institution, we certainly don't tend to work on anything restricted or overly applied that limits our ability to publish. However, we do work on some of the largest challenges that are going to affect the society, across the board, regardless of application. In the security space, a number of examples include how we've had our faculty work on secure connected vehicles and hacking into them to show how these smart cars, these software-defined cars, are actually extremely vulnerable to threats. And you can imagine how that could apply to underwater autonomous vehicles and any other autonomous vehicle through our Center for Network Systems. We've remotely captured key generation. We've identified and proven security vulnerabilities in things like TSA scanners, and I go on and on. The point being that while a lot of our research may, we're not going to be working on a lot of restricted things. There's a SCIF at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. They do a little more of that sort of work, but broadly, the UC system, UC San Diego, is going to be working on things that are going to affect society as a whole, and allows them to publish. So to answer the question, we're of course going to be supportive in any sort of collaboration. But just noting, of course, that our goal and our faculty's goal is to publish our work and not be confined by restrictions on that front.
Thank you, Will. Stephen, next question is for you. By the way, Will, I think you won the prize for the best background. No question. So next question for Stephen. How do American companies engage with the defense industry ecosystem in Australia to support the AUKUS arrangements?
I think there's actually incredible opportunities for the industry to engage. And we just started to touch there from Will on the skills component. And I think that's the first opportunity that is available in the near term. There's a huge need actually across all three nations to start increasing the body of people to actually support the nuclear submarine capability. There's a lot of media in Australia about how small and how much of a challenge that will be for Australia to get to the numbers and skills that are required for that workforce. But actually, it's not an Australian-owned problem, as I'm sure you're probably aware of, even within the San Diego region, and certainly where I sit here in the UK. Actually, skills in this area are short everywhere, and actually that really does require a trilateral effort to move that forward. There's going to be opportunities to work with Australian universities and universities in the US and the UK around graduate programs. But there's also many other things from vocational training, actually core education in the science and maths fields across the Australian population, and then into actually job placements and actually how do we bring this workforce up over what's going to be a 10 to 15 year period. either to support the Virginia boats or on the SSM program that's going to follow in about 10 to 15 years away. But while I think the other part to look at, it's easy to look at the education is probably the simplest one and probably the most obvious one for people. But the other one is that while the design that was selected for the Australian new build boats is based on a UK design, there's many, many opportunities that will exist for US companies in the manufacturing process and throughout that supply chain. Just to point out one example there in San Diego that I'm aware of would be something like Trident Maritime Systems, who provide ship furnishing to a lot of the US and UK Defence Department ship builds already. And they'd be a natural fit into an Australian ecosystem. And it's very easy to go, well, that's 10 or 15 years away before that's going to be required. But actually, in order to bring up that skilled workforce and in order to generate capability onshore in Australia, I think those opportunities will start now, and they'll actually need to be supplemented in order to provide the revenue towards those sort of companies. The ways that South Australia is looking at the problem is how do we actually inject those companies into our existing defence shipbuilding programs? We're currently building a series of Type 26 based designed frigates. There's potential Corvette program to come. We also have a current upgrade to the current diesel submarines, for example. So how do we inject those companies into that current pipeline to get them started early? Also, can we identify additional sources of revenue for the critical companies that we're trying to attract across dual-use technologies? Can we find, and this applies definitely in Pillar 2, can we find places to use that precision navigation and timing that Emily spoke about, say in our medical sector, to actually allow some of those quantum companies to take up placement and be among the ecosystem early. And of course, I've already talked about skills. Obviously, getting and teaming with the universities or across the education sector is the other real early opportunity that I think, as South Australia, we're certainly out there trying to grab as many companies as possible to become part of that ecosystem.
Thank you, Stephen. Melissa, through this security partnership, the US is now expected to share advanced defense technologies with Australia, including technologies related to nuclear propulsion. Can you elaborate a bit on Northrop Grumman's experience in designing and building technologies related to nuclear propulsion? And could AUKUS foster further collaboration in other areas between the two countries' defense sector?
Yeah, so I think that we definitely can. Northrop Grumman has a proven record of providing propulsion, sensor, navigation, launcher, and platform level capabilities to the US nuclear submarine fleet. Some of the key objectives of commonality and interoperability have been the cornerstone for US and Australia defense programs to date. And so now we've got new opportunities to extend this objective to the Royal Australian Navy's nuclear submarine fleet. Northrop Grumman has more than 50 years of experience in undersea, and we're already an integral part of the Virginia-class construction. I can't speak in too much detail on nuclear propulsion due to the sensitivity of that topic, but I can say that we've been working with Australia for more than 2 decades, and we're committed to integrating multi-domain operations from sea to space to help our Australian customers solve their toughest challenges.
As a follow-up to that question and your response, can you speak to some of the other technologies the company is operating in Australia?
Yeah, so I can speak to a few of those technologies. Australia was actually the first to field our MESA radar sensor system. Also in partnership with the US Navy, we've designed, built, and delivered a system here in San Diego called J.Crew Drake for Australia that helps counter improvised explosive devices, or also known as IEDs, to protect the warfighter. We support the Royal Australian Navy with the capability on their ships that helps enhance interoperability across multiple domains. And finally, in September of 2022, we unveiled Australia's first high-altitude, long-endurance unmanned aircraft system, the MQ-4C Triton. And that's built in our Palmdale, California manufacturing site, but a lot of the design and development is done here in San Diego. And we're very excited about that introduction into service with the first aircraft planned for delivery in Australia in mid-2024.
2024, that's pretty soon. That's great news.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Melissa. Next question is for Stephen. How will the AUKUS partnership impact Australia's defense industry and contribute to job creation, skills development, and technology transfer within the country?
Well, I've probably sort of given part of this answer already, but a couple of extra points that are worth noting. I talk about the challenge that we've got and that we have to address. One thing many people may not be aware of is that we're actually running in Australia at record high levels of employment. We've got very, very few unemployed, and that in particular is even a bigger problem in South Australia, where the ship build activity occurs and much of the defence spend occurs within Australia. So against that backdrop, as a nation, we've also got going on a major energy transition to remove carbon from our industries, and a continued boom in the mining industry, which is also particularly important, particularly in its link to critical minerals. So we've got a huge demand on and pull on skilled labour that we need to meet as a challenge. I think that we see that as Australians, as a nation building opportunity, and certainly in South Australia, our Premier sees it as a massive opportunity in terms of building for our state. And I sort of mentioned that goes across everything from the core education system right through to graduates and postgraduate qualifications. There's a lot of lead initiatives already started to a team to bring those skills that aren't already onshore, and to basically use and utilise educational institutions across the US and the UK to help us to develop that workforce. And just as one simple example, one of our Adelaide universities, the University of South Australia, has just established a Tri-Nation Executive MBA program, which is focused on global defence industry, with the concept that this executive MBA will move people around the three nations, and in particular, focusing on both the technologies and the potential that is offered not just by AUKUS, but actually by the relationship between the three nations in technology overall. So we've got a big problem to face. I think I mentioned it before, but we're very, very conscious also that poaching is not part of the solution. Taking workforce from San Diego and moving it out to sunny, well, as sunny Australia, it's probably as sunny there, so is not going to help out the overall picture. So Australia is certainly treating this problem as one that is a trilateral problem, and we need to lift the whole base of the workforce and not just the Australian workforce to achieve that.
Thank you, Stephen. Good answer, good information. Will, next question is for you. On the topic of education, obviously, can you tell us about the professional development opportunities within the university for individuals in our local defense sector and how they are tailored to the industry, in addition to this tri-country MBA that you mentioned, which is not UCSD, but kind of related?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, that's what we do, right? Is our bread and butter is education, and even our research is about educating graduate talent in relevant fields. So, for industry professionals, folks that are looking to maybe upskill or gain additional skill sets in areas of interest, aside from if they don't have an undergraduate degree in a certain area and getting an undergraduate degree or a graduate degree, we also have a lot of different kind of executive ed opportunities that Stephen was mentioning. Notably, in our Jacobs School of Engineering, we have what's called our Masters of Advanced Studies program. Specifically built for the working professional to have industry partners as of topics of importance. So currently they are systems and engineering, value supply chain, and cyber physical social systems. Those last two are kind of broadly part of systems engineering as well. These are excellent opportunities, offered hybrid, so by no means is it restricted to people in San Diego. That's new as of the pandemic, so there's some good that came out of it. And in addition to all of those things, within the School of Engineering, we of course have our UCSD extension that has a number of courses that are a lot shorter than maybe a full degree program that'll give you certificates and things like that. It's worth noting that all of our education at the School of Engineering and in that Master's of Advanced Studies program has direct feedback from government and industry partners, both nationally and internationally. The program that I run has about 80 corporate executives that give quarterly input into our education by way of our dean. And so we're making sure that we're educating our workforce to be relevant to our industry and government partners. Northrop Grumman, one of our strongest, actually specifically within the mission systems sector, but also aerospace systems, and then local, military partners, Naval Information Warfare System, NAVAIR, the broader Navy, and other large defense contractors, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, et cetera. All of them making sure that we're educating the workforce in things that are relevant to our industry and government partners.
Great, thank you all. Stephen, back to you for a question on AUKUS. How does the AUKUS security partnership complement existing defense alliances and partnerships that Australia has, such as the Five Eyes Alliance and regional defense arrangements?
So I think the key point here is it is complementary, and that's probably the key point. As I understand it, AUKUS is predominantly an agreement to share technology and to improve security. The Five Eyes sits there as the well-established intelligence sharing framework, which also extends to many of our allies within Europe and other areas in different ways through other intelligence sharing agreements. I think we've also got the area of statecraft, which again, I talked about that defence security review. It talks a lot about in that national defence concept about the importance of statecraft as part of the way we engage in the region. And many of the other agreements that we have in place, such as the Quad or the Defence Cooperation Program, are the defence parts or pillars of that statecraft, how we engage with everybody else in the region in Australia's interest and hopefully in the interest of our other allies. So I think that's the answer to the question. This one sits very much as a technology agreement that allows some access to some of those really important technologies in the interest of improving security. Those other agreements we have in place are either there as part of our statecraft in engaging with the region, or in the case of the Five Eyes agreement as an intelligence sharing agreement. So they really do give us a really good comprehensive suite with which, of course, the US is one of our most important and key partners.
Thanks, Stephen. Will, does UCSD play a role, any role, or would it be willing to participate in shaping policy related to security partnerships and ensuring that security partnerships are aligned with their strategic goals?
Yeah, we have in the past. In between the Jacobs School of Engineering and our School for Global Policy and Strategy, formerly International Relations and Pacific Studies, we had the former dean of the Global Policy and Strategy School played a key role in shaping international policy in the wireless industry around security, privacy, specific to the wireless industry. He was a major contributor in policy development there. And then another example is we have a MacArthur Genius Awarded professor and the director for our Center for Network Systems and Security, Stefan Savage, he's a world-renowned security researcher. When I was mentioning hacking into the software-defined vehicles and autonomous vehicles, he was leading that. He was the lead PI on those projects. He has, openly sort of said the reason why he stays in academia is because there aren't enough academics that are well represented on the front lines of security and privacy, both nationally and internationally. And so and a big part of that is being able to affect public policy through their research. And it's a lot easier to do that from an academic platform than being a software engineer or a security engineer in industry. So it's a big reason why he continues to stay in academia. We will always be welcoming those things and having subject matter experts help define policy for these sorts of things. With the, again, going back to, we are a public institution focused on, enhancing the greater good of society. We're always going to want to play a role in things that are going to affect the public positively and is notably in the area of safety and security.
Staying on questions related to education, then actually for the next two questions, but the first one being for Melissa. Melissa, how does Northrop Grumman collaborate with the academic sector to prepare its workforce for the future to continue innovating and developing new technologies?
Sure, yeah. So we're very actively engaged here locally with the schools. We work in San Diego specifically through Mesa College with UC San Diego. We do a lot of recruiting and hiring as well as mentoring. Within UC San Diego, we do a lot of engagements with the School of Engineering, since a lot of those folks, graduate and come in and work for us. We're actually one of the top 5 employers for UC San Diego graduates. On the research side, we're a member of the MICS and on their board and do engagements there as well. And so we do a lot of, involvement in their systems engineering work. And then expanding more broadly, we also collaborate with Texas A&M Innovation Proving Grounds and AT&T on their 5G networks. And then tying it back to Australia, we've got more than 65 partnerships that we've put in place, ranging from universities and STEM-related events to government, charities, and non-government organizations. Focus there really being on the direct impacts and activities to support industry and provide those ongoing opportunities to help, provide the skilled workforce needed to do the technology development that we have. And so, we've worked with universities across the nation and in Australia in research and case studies towards this common goal.
Thank you, Melissa. And Will, again on the education topic, but can you share your insight on, and you've already done this a little bit, but further share your insight on UCSD's research and development programs for students that support our region's defense cluster's needs? And once developed, these technologies, are they made available to the defense industry for contractors to license and commercialize?
Yeah, so I mean, that's like my job is to make those sorts of partnerships happen. We have, Melissa just mentioned, for example, MIX, which I put in the chat, stands for Machine Intelligence, Computing, and Security. That's one of our agile research centers. We say agile, meaning that they're meant to be very flexible and nimble and responsive to projects that can be spun up for 6, 12, 18, 24 months and spun down if, once they're done or it doesn't work out the way that you thought it would, whatever the case may be, and then starting a new project. It really, those sorts of research labs are ripe for industry partnership. They were stood up by our dean for industry. They have to be funded partially by industry if they want to sustain. So our dean will set up these agile research centers, and within 5 years they need to show how they're being funded partially by industry in order to be sustainable and to continue. So we're always looking for industry and government partners to work with us on our research challenges in these research centers. And again, that always comes down to, as I mentioned earlier, kind of part of the goal of the research is to develop the talent a big part of it is develop a talent that is then going to take that research and hopefully commercialize it, or at least utilize what they've learned to, positively impact society. The companies that work with us really do kind of engage both on the fundamental research and the hands-on, kind of practical research as well. It's through mentorship, but also through fellowship support and funding grad students to work on things, through contracts and grants and sponsored research contracts that actually have to have an outcome in 12 to 18 months versus just, fundamental theoretical research, and other, ways of doing joint collaboration, embedding industry into a lab to upskill what they're working on, by way of a visiting industry fellow program and a bunch of other things like that. So again, my job is to kind of see all of our industry partners as the customers of our research, and making sure that all of the fundamental research that we're doing does have some roots in real practical application. UC San Diego is really positioned well to be a strong partner in the government and defense space, and has been for a really long time, noting that about 30 to 40% of our research is funded by government and industry partners, which if you look at other universities across the world, that number is less than 10% most of the time. And that's, again, a big push by our dean to be doing things that are going to be impactful in the next 3 to 5 years, and not just looking at things that are 30, 40, 50 years out. And again, I mean, just being in San Diego, it's part of our DNA to be working with the military installment here. So we're always going to be open to working collaboratively, and that again is part of myself and my team's job to make those things happen.
Great, thank you, Will, and thank you also for providing the definition of MICS. I was wondering what that was, so thank you, and that's for everyone that's on the chat if anyone's curious. All right, so thank you, everyone. This has been a great discussion. We're coming up on the closing time. I think we're going to move to the Q&A, and we already have a couple of questions coming up on the chat and via the Q&A function as well. So I'm going to kick it off with the first question. This is from someone in the audience, and it is for Stephen. Question is, what measures will be taken to ensure transparency and accountability in decision-making processes related to the AUKUS partnership, particularly in terms of financial implications and long-term strategic commitments?
I think the last part of that is easy to answer, which is the long-term strategic commitment. Certainly from an Australian perspective, AUKUS was something that had bilateral support. Both sides of politics are strongly behind it. And in that perspective, I'd like to think the political will remain with the programs for what is going to be a long, long time to bring this technology into service in Australia. So I think the strategic commitment part is quite clear. The transparency in terms of procurement or in terms of finance, it would be fair to say that Australian Defence has a relatively strong history in terms of transparent procurement processes and open procurement processes. In a time of conflict, or as things become where defence becomes a more closer and important part of the government portfolio, I think the speed of decision making goes up, and with that, the need of speed in procurement goes up. I would like to think that doesn't mean shortcutting process. I would like to think it means actually still going through the process, but doing it at speed. It possibly means having to make decisions with less information, but I think the process will continue to occur. As I said, Australia has got a long history of that in our procurement, and I think we can expect it to stay that way going forward.
Great, thank you, Stephen. Next question is for Melissa, also from the audience. It's a similar question to one that was directed earlier to Will, but does the private sector or companies like Northrop Grumman collaborate with the public sector in shaping partnerships like the AUKUS partnership we're talking about today?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we've got folks in our headquarters that are, in the Washington, D.C. Beltway area. So we do collaborate quite a bit with the public sector on shaping policy that's both supportive to advancing capabilities and also in alignment with our national defense strategy. So promoting capabilities for our closest partners and allies that, is conducive to supporting all of our joint interests.
Thank you, Melissa. I also have a question for Emily. Great, you're there. Thank you, Emily. Question is, can you tell us about the role of local consulates and trade offices in supporting AUKUS and other international agreements and initiatives?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm based here in San Diego, and my role is really about connecting people here in San Diego to the UK. And I do see from the chat that there is also somebody here based doing something similar for Australia as well. So what I would suggest is that if anybody does see opportunities here, then please do reach out to me, and I'll put my email in the chat as well. And I can connect you with the relevant government department or the relevant trade department as well. So it's really just about reaching out, having discussions about ways in which we can collaborate, and I can connect everybody. So I'll put my email in the chat now, and if for any reason people can't see it, then I can try another route.
Thank you, Emily. And of course, if anybody does have questions and you're having, you can't find any information, please, the chamber is also, of course, willing to and able to help out in making contacts. I do want to, you mentioned, Emily, someone from Australia, and I do want to call out and thank Dave McHugh, the Director of Defense and Security for Australia's federal government's Trade and Investment Commission in the US, and also located here in San Diego. So thank you, Dave, for joining the conversation. And Dave's email is also noted in the chat for anybody that might be interested in reaching out to him. All right.
Yes, can I, just before you move on from that one, can I just put a plug there? We've also got Stuart Nutting on, who is my equivalent in the United States. So he's New York based, but South Australia has an equivalent of myself in New York and a person in Houston that can also help. So I'll get Stu to put his details in the chat as well. Obviously, my mandate, I've come today because of my defence background, but my mandate in the normal part of the world is to look after the UK and Europe. So I spend most of my time looking after Emily's companies.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate the insight as well. So we really do have a great set of players here in the industry. So thanks everyone for joining. And so that does wrap up our Q&A session. We had unless there's anything else that comes up here in the last minute, but no, I don't see anything. So
there's one question in the Q&A chat here that I can answer there. It's it just came in a minute ago.
Yeah,
it says it says, how does UCSD determine what projects and capabilities are the focus of the Machine Intelligence Computing and Security Center? So the capabilities are really, defined by the faculty that are part of the center, right? So we recruit these faculty from all over the world to join UC San Diego, and then these centers, including MIX, sort of self-assemble based on the expertise and capabilities of the faculty. How projects are defined really are based heavily on industry. So we have these, our faculty are obviously going after the big agency grants, NSF, DARPA, NIH, et cetera. But those are typically the 15, 20-year out projects. And in the near term, they want themselves and their students to also get hands-on, more practical application sort of projects from industry and government partners. And so, for example, Northrop Grumman is a part of the MIX Center. By being a part of the center, they have a sort of a seat at the table to define what projects those grad students are doing. And it can be everything from really, high level, broad. Hey, I'd like to see how the work you're doing in AI and machine learning can be applied to edge devices, which is going to be very broad. And some of the funding that goes to that center will now go to the faculty and his or her grad students that are working in that space. Or it could go as narrow as, hey, one of the members of the center, maybe Northrop, has a very specific project that they want to work on and see what our faculty and grad students can do in a defined time frame. And if it's a technology that could, further benefit Northrop Grumman's technologies, okay, well, that we can set those things up too, where it becomes a sponsored research contract that is 6, 12, 18, 24 months, something like that, where there's an expected outcome by the end. And then the Northrop Grumman, and I'm just using you as an example because you're right here, but like Northrop Grumman has a, first right of refusal to either license that technology or not. And so again, that's kind of how the commercialization piece comes into play. But so that's kind of the bigger answer there is our government industry partners, when they're part of the center, funding the grad students, they kind of have a seat at the table to define exactly what those projects are going to look like.
Thank you. Well, great examples. Thank you. We have another question here that just came up, and we do have a few minutes, so we'll cover it. This is for Stephen. What are the potential diplomatic, economic, or security challenges that Australia may face as a result of its involvement in the AUKUS security partnership, and how does the government plan to address them?
This one, I'm not really in a position to answer on behalf of how the federal government would actually, plans to address them. I must admit, I'm not aware. The challenges, though, they stand out fairly strongly. The first one is ensuring that our other close allies of both the US, Australia, and the UK all don't feel ostracised by the process, and remain key and important allies for the three nations. So here I'm referring to everything from the NATO environment through to the Quad, through to our partners in Canada and New Zealand and the like. So I think ensuring that our allies are reassured that they're still very much part of our entire position is important. I think the second one, and probably the key relationship, is with China. I'm probably better, again, I've said I have to be careful what I say in this area, just to make sure I'm not representing the government. So I'm probably better actually answering this, and I stay with a quote from our Defence Minister for about a month ago, where he said, a stable relationship between Australia and China is in the interest of both countries and the broader region. Australia will continue to cooperate with China where we can, disagree where we must, manage our differences wisely, and above all else, engage in and vigorously pursue our own national interest. And I think that really summarises well the balance, well, I think we all play, and certainly Australia plays, in terms of our economic relationships into Asia, with, this is our key and most important defence partnerships.
Yeah, not an easy question, Stephen, but thank you. That's a great answer. Appreciate it. All right. Well, I want to move on and close the session. Thank you, everyone, for your valuable insights. Will, Melissa, Emily, Stephen, really, really great discussion. I think everyone learned a lot, and hopefully we'll find opportunities going forward for our companies here in the region to collaborate and cooperate with companies around the three nations. So again, thank you so much. Thanks to all of the chamber staff, especially Kenya and Jimena, for setting up and arranging this great discussion. Hearing from all of us and everyone in the industry is really key to ensuring that all of us who work daily to maximize San Diego's global identity and have the information awareness to be effective advocates for the region. One quick announcement as we close, but the Chamber will be hosting its annual Congressional Luncheon on June 2nd, where we will hear directly from San Diego County's congressional delegation, and attendees will have the opportunity to submit questions of their own to be answered by Congress members. For details, please click on the event's website, which Jimena just posted in the chat. And thank you again, and everyone have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.
Everyone.
Thank you. Bye.